In 2006, humanity made a decision that shocked the world. Astronomers gathered to vote on the fate of a tiny, distant world at the edge of the solar system. For 76 years, we had called it the ninth planet. But that day, we erased it. We stripped it of its title and demoted it to something new, a dwarf planet. The world we rejected was Pluto. For decades, Pluto was little more than a blurry dot in telescopes, a frozen speck drifting nearly 6 billion kilometers from the Sun. Most scientists assumed it was nothing special, just a cold, lifeless rock lost in darkness. But in 2006, the same year Pluto was demoted, a spacecraft began a journey that would change everything. That spacecraft was New Horizons. It would travel for nearly 9 years, racing through space at over 50,000 kilometers per hour, chasing a world humanity had already dismissed. As the spacecraft moved farther from Earth, the Sun slowly began to shrink. At first, it still looked like the bright star we know, but beyond the orbit of Neptune, the sunlight faded into a distant glow. By the time you reach Pluto, the Sun no longer dominates the sky. It becomes just another star. Even at noon, the sky on Pluto would appear almost completely black, a permanent twilight where the sunlight is nearly 1,000 times weaker than on Earth. And then, in July 2015, the cameras of New Horizons finally revealed the surface. What scientists saw stunned them. Pluto was not a frozen dead rock, it was a world. Stretching across one hemisphere was a gigantic bright region, shaped almost perfectly like a heart. Scientists named this region Sputnik Planitia, a vast basin more than 1,000 kilometers wide. At first glance, it looked like a smooth plain of ice. But this ice was not water. It was made of frozen nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide, forming a massive glacier unlike anything on Earth. And even more surprisingly, this glacier is moving. Deep beneath Pluto's frozen crust, tiny amounts of heat still rise from its interior. That faint warmth causes the nitrogen ice above it to slowly churn in enormous convection cells, rising and sinking over millions of years like thick, frozen lava. This process constantly erases impact craters. In other words, parts of Pluto's surface are geologically young. A world we thought was dead is still active. But the landscape becomes even stranger at the edges of this icy plain. Towering above the nitrogen glaciers are massive mountains rising more than 3 kilometers into the dark sky. On Earth, mountains are made of rock. On Pluto, rock is almost irrelevant. The temperature here falls to nearly minus 230 degrees Celsius. At that extreme cold, ordinary water ice becomes as hard as granite, forming jagged mountain ranges of solid frozen water. Some of these mountains appear to slowly drift across the nitrogen plains like gigantic icebergs, entire mountain ranges floating across a frozen sea. And covering much of this alien landscape is a strange reddish dust high in Pluto's thin atmosphere. Sunlight interacts with methane gas and triggers complex chemical reactions. These reactions create organic compounds called follins. They slowly fall back to the surface like a fine crimson snow, coating Pluto's mountains and valleys in deep shades of red and orange. But perhaps the greatest mystery of Pluto lies hidden far below the surface. When scientists studied the enormous weight of Sputnik Planitia, they realized something strange. The basin should have caused Pluto to gradually rotate over time, but it didn't. The most likely explanation is extraordinary. Beneath hundreds of kilometers of ice, Pluto may be hiding a massive underground ocean of liquid water, a dark ocean buried in one of the coldest places in the solar system. And wherever liquid water exists, one question always follows: could something live there? At the moment, scientists simply don't know. But Pluto is not alone in its frozen kingdom. Orbiting nearby is its giant moon, Charon. Charon is so massive compared to Pluto that the two worlds actually orbit a point in empty space between them, forming what astronomers call a binary system. If you stood on Pluto facing Charon, the moon would hang permanently in the sky, enormous and unmoving. It would never rise, it would never set. And beyond Charon, four smaller moons drift through the darkness: Nix, Hydra, Kerberos, and Styx, spinning chaotically around this distant system. Together, they form a tiny, mysterious planetary family at the edge of the solar system. Pluto may no longer be called a planet, but the images from New Horizons revealed something far more interesting: a world of moving glaciers, floating mountains, red snow, and hidden oceans, a place stranger than anyone ever imagined. And Pluto is only the beginning, because farther out in the darkness of the Kuiper Belt lie thousands of unknown worlds waiting to be explored. But if we travel slightly closer to the Sun, we encounter another giant world, where winds roar faster than sound and storms rage across a deep blue atmosphere, where scientists believe diamonds may fall from the sky. That world is Neptune.